welcome to Radically Conservative, a show based on faith, family, and freedom. Today is going to be a different type of show. In the meantime, first, I want to thank our executive producer, Jimmy Laveri, my producer, Corinne Basabi, and the team at BronxNet here putting on the production. We have a special guest today that will do a two-part series with us. It's called Change the Charter, Change the City, which is a petition that will be coming out this summer for all to see. My name is Steph Liggio. I'm your host, and today we are bringing in Jim Wagner, an attorney from Brooklyn who is spearheading this Change the Charter, Change the City. Jimmy, welcome.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity
Great to have you.
to speak about this.
So, Jimmy, you are starting this initiative. It's 10 reforms that you have under this single petition. So explain to the audience why any reform to the New York City Charter has to be done via petition.
So it doesn't have to be done via petition. It can also be done via our city council. However, the ideas that are put forth on this petition, our city council and our mayor independently will never approve. The Democratic Uniparty, they don't want progress within this beautiful, wonderful city of New York.
No.
They want power. Yes.
Thank you, Jimmy, for explaining that. So we're going to go through the reforms themselves. So you've created a blueprint for structural change, and you've put a lot of time and effort into this and thought deeply about it. But it's also because of your history within what happens during the COVID lockdowns, mandates, et cetera, that forced this to come. So the first of the reforms is the recall of elected officials, and you're asking for this at a 5% threshold. So I agree that there should be a recall option since it was removed from the New York State Constitution, which I think was done unconstitutionally. So explain this to us and explain the 5% threshold, why you want it at 5%.
Sure. Within New York City, the 5% threshold would, 100%, what it would say is within election, say our last mayoral election, we had 2 million people participate and vote. If, in fact, we were able to get 5% of that number, so 10% of 2 million is 200,000, 5% is 100,000. You would put together a petition with 100,000 signatures requesting that the mayor be recalled, or any of the other citywide or city offices, whether it's city council, public advocate, comptroller. Every one of these offices, they had a certain amount of people who voted for them. You would have to get 5% of those total votes. And with 5% of those total votes, you submit the petition to the city clerk. And then within 30 days, there's a new election. They put together a new date. And a lot of times, the reason you would do this is because politicians have a long history of promising the sun and the moon to get into office. And then the day they're in office, you know what? They forget about what they promised their people. And that 5% is a legitimate, strong number to make sure to keep our politicians honest.
Oh, I appreciate that for sure. The second is Office of Municipal Worker Fairness, and this is an elected office that you're proposing.
Correct. So let's be very clear. If anything that we learned from COVID was, in my opinion, and people in New York City are still allowed to have opinions,
now.
The coordination and between the unions, the union leaders, and the city of New York during COVID eviscerated, destroyed, and ruined so many lives of union workers, public sector workers. They took standardized statutory due process rights that these people, especially our teachers in our schools, were entitled to before they were removed from their job, and they wiped them out. What they said was, hey, we have an emergency, therefore, meaning the government, your executive branch, your legislature, they can completely ignore contracts, they can ignore the law. And then they went to their good friends in the allegedly third part of government called the judiciary. And the judiciary just toed the line for them. The judiciary in New York State literally said, hey, it was an emergency, therefore we're going to let the government do whatever they want to the people. This office would stop that. It would give a place for every single New York City real worker, public sector worker, union worker, all across the city to go and give their grievances. And hopefully, within that office, look, people get fired all the time and they get fired for legit reasons. During COVID, thousands, hundreds of thousands of New York City workers' rights were trampled on, and it was done by the government. They need a place that they can go. Solo practicing attorneys like myself and some of the other attorneys that did it, we can't, we don't have the resources to battle the city of New York when the city of New York is destroying our workers. The workers deserve a taxpayer funded office that they can go to that will defend them against the city. The unions aren't doing it, the city isn't doing it. They need a place, and that's what the purpose of this office would be.
We could argue, though, that the public advocate should have been that office.
I'm going to tell you, I don't know. I don't think the public advocate knows what their job is. It appears that it's just a tryout to be in place to be maybe the next mayor or run for mayor. I am not sure what our public advocate did for any worker during COVID. He didn't stick up. That's Jumani Williams. They didn't stick up for workers. They didn't stick up for anybody. There was plenty of civic engagement with BLM protest, and that's great. And I'm not taking away from that fundamental right. But we had laws in place to protect our public sector workers, and the public advocate went silent. He wasn't anywhere, wasn't anything to do for them. I mean, listen, he lives in the White House of Brooklyn. It's not, it's a difficult place when you live in, it's great life when you're living behind barbed wire fence with armed guards and M16s.
True.
It's real easy to tell the workers to eat cake, right?
Right.
Let them eat cake because that's what the public advocate's actions said.
Right. And we actually have to constantly remind people how it happened, how it went down, because a lot of people are getting memory hold on what went down during COVID and how long New York City was locked down, because we didn't reopen like the rest of the country. We didn't reopen even like the rest of New York State. I remember summer of 2020, I was out in New Jersey because everything was open in New Jersey. Yeah, you had to wear a mask, yada, yada, but at least you had life. You could get out of the house and nobody looked at you funny, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it's something that we absolutely need to maintain.
They had segregation. I think people really need to understand what telling people to show up with vaccine cards and medical proof, like they were literally segregating society.
Yeah.
And no, that's not okay under any circumstance. You're not allowed to segregate based on medical rights.
Right.
No.
Right. No, I appreciate that. So the city council expansion, one representative per 50,000 residents. Jim, let's start by telling everyone, how large is a city council district currently?
Currently, a city council district will run anywhere from about 190,000 residents to 250,000 residents, right? So that's one person in city council representing that many people, right? It's just not equitable. Everyone loves that word, equity. It's not equitable. I am very familiar with Brooklyn, so I'm going to talk to the different neighborhoods of Brooklyn.
Okay.
And I'm sure we can find it universally across the city.
Sure.
But let's take Mercedes Narcisse City Council, it's 46. That city council district goes from the Seaview housing all the way through the coast down to Mill Basin, Garrison Beach, Marine Park. It is such a wide, diverse area. There's no possible way a city council member in good faith can stand for the people of Seaview houses, and that's, it's a large public housing complex, and simultaneously stand for the people of Marine Park, which is a large single-family home area surrounded with a big marine park in the middle of it, right? They have two sets of priorities, two sets of things that they need, two sets of understandings of how their lives should be conducted, and the idea that they've taken dense areas. So public housing, co-ops, it's all very dense because they're buildings that build up where you can have 100 families in that building with 4 members of each family. You're looking at 400 people in just a square block. Whereas if you go to single family home areas, go to Mill Basin, you have that same 400 spread out over almost a half a mile. They are they're beholden to the dense upward building. And look, everyone should have fair representation in the city legislature. And how do we get there? All we need to do is reduce the amount of people that each city council member represents. This is not something that there should be a true bipartisan issue. Everyone wants democracy. Everyone wants to see their representation honored and meaningful. How do we get there? I believe by reducing our city council representatives to one for every 50,000 citizens, voting elective citizens. We should be in much better shape to make sure legislation coming out of city council properly reflects the diversity of the city instead of just properly reflecting dense areas of the population.
I agree, especially when the city council has the City of Yes tool in their toolbox now, that every developer can come in and woo the city council member and say, I want more of this, and it gives you this number of units, so your district will expand by this number of units so that you can say that you've increased housing and made it more affordable to live in your district. So that's something that needs to be addressed directly with the citizens. Not enough people, I feel, pay attention to these very hyper-local races. It's always about, well, the president did this wrong. Well, he might be doing that wrong, but that's not affecting your kitchen table. What's affecting your kitchen table is everybody at city council voting themselves a 30% increase. Was that it this year? A 30% increase for themselves, which is going to give them an income far greater than the median income of any city council district. And we can go through the same for Assembly and the Senate. They're all asking for raises while talking about budget shortfalls. And here we have the blueprint here for this charter to change the city, which really, Jim, I think this is stellar work so far. We're going to go into the PSA break. When we come back, we're going to finish with 2 more points from your blueprint. And again, for the audience, this is the first of a 2-part series. So Jim, we'll be back the next show to go through the last of the 10 pieces of reform for New York City. Change the charter, change the city. We'll be back after this PSA. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed those PSAs. They look great. We're talking today with Jim Wagner for the 10 charter reforms under Change the Charter, Change the City. Jim, thank you for coming on today. We appreciate. I want to open with how can people find you and how can they learn more about this petition?
It's great. We have a very simple website, wereformnyc.com. We Reform, it's WEREFORM NYC.com. You go to the website, there's a right in the top right hand corner volunteer button. This is all done with volunteers. I cannot stress that enough, that we all have to sacrifice, we all have to volunteer, we all have to get this done. We're going to have volunteer captains in each of the boroughs. The idea, we have 5 boroughs. We need a minimum of 50,000 signatures from registered voters. So if clearly we have 2 months to get it, if we can get 10,000 signatures out of each of the boroughs, that'd be a fantastic way to solidify this. We submit it. The city of New York, through the Office of Corp Counsel, has 10 days to file formal objections with the courts. If they do not file objections with the courts, they'll be on the ballot in November. You flip the ballot just like they did with the city of Yes. You can go through each of these 10 fundamental changes. And again, you may not agree with some of the changes, and that's okay. You'll just vote no. You may agree. You say, hey, I want to see recalled. I want to see the 5% threshold, and you'll vote yes. You may say, hey, look, municipal workers, union workers, they already have enough protections. They have their unions. I don't want to see my tax dollars for that. And you'll put no. This is how democracy works. You don't need to agree with all 10 reforms to get it to see them on the charter. We want to just have all 10 reforms on the charter, and then come election day, you make your independent decision, your independent vote, to see if any of them will make it into our New York City charter. Right now, our New York City charter benefits only the Democratic Uniparty, and it's a terrible state. It's a terrible condition we're in, where there is no second voice. The purposes of these charter amendments is to make sure the voice of the people is still heard.
I appreciate that. And, since we normally don't have primary elections on the Republican side, and the Democrats really try to hold that to a minimum so everyone can save money from their banks. Really what this does is it allows people an opportunity to go door to door and meet the minimum 10,000 people within their county, maybe within their district, to say, hey, I'm on board with this. I'm running for a state office this year, but I'm on board with this for New York City, and I think you would be too, and let's have a conversation. So it could really help those candidates who don't have a primary challenge to get out there this spring season and approach their voters and have an open conversation, have that dialogue that our founders had intended for, so that we can open up and say, let's have weekly meetings about what's wrong, what's good, and they can have themselves viewed as a candidate for their office as, this person really has their finger on the pulse of New York City. I really do want to send them to Albany to represent me because I believe they understand based on them supporting this charter. So I think it'll come naturally that some of the candidates will support this.
Agreed.
So I wanted to go back to the blueprint here. So we were up to number 4, right? Am I right? Yes. This is
Correct.
Another new elected office that you would like to see, an office of constitutional rights. I'm on board, especially since our reform was removed from the Constitution and replaced in 2024. Remember, Proposal 1 was dubbed making abortion valid up to 9 months, but it did way more than that, and people did not realize that it was up to 9 months for abortion. They just wanted abortion to be legal. I don't know what they were thinking what was going on. But then there was also an erosion of parental rights. When your child is in public school now, if they say, I don't want my mommy to know, your mommy will not know, ever. That is between the child and the teacher what will take place in school. And that was done in 2024, Proposal 1. Not enough people know. So let's talk about the Office of Constitutional Rights.
So the Office of Constitutional Rights is actually an extremely unique and large mandate. What it would do is would create a public office where the citizens of New York can go to allege their constitutional rights are being infringed upon or impeded upon by our city government. Why is this important? During COVID, the government chose what constitutional rights were important and what constitutional rights they could sweep under the rug. Mm-hmm. They chose that, protesting for BLM and this and that was important. And I agree, those protests were 100% constitutional, and everyone should have let them happen. That's great. Simultaneously, they said you cannot go to your house of worship. You cannot worship the Lord Jesus Christ. You cannot go to your synagogue. Cannot go to your mosque. We're shutting them down. That was inappropriate. So the idea between the Office of Constitutional Rights, I want to remind everyone who's watching this, forget your federal rights. They're great. They're amazing, and they are historic. You know what's even more historic? Our New York State constitutional rights. Right here in the state of New York, we have our own constitution that was created before the federal constitution that gives us the right to free exercise. For those who don't know what the right to free exercise is, it's the right to worship the way you want to worship. Whether there's a pandemic or not, it's irrelevant, and it's none of the government's business. If I want to pack myself into my church with 50 other people so we can sing and dance in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ during a COVID pandemic, that is my God-given right.
That's right.
The governor, the mayor, the city council, none of them had the legal right to take that away. So built into this Office of the Constitutional Rights, it orders and directs only within the 5 boroughs, because our city charter is only within the 5 boroughs. It mandates that all the judges, when they are hit with a lawsuit brought by the Office of Constitutional Rights of New York City, that there's an automatic TRO that goes in place to protect the rights of the citizen until the case is fully heard, whether that case is going to be heard by the Supreme Court, the Appellate Division, the Court of Appeals, or all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. That TRO is going to be there and in place. So that makes sure that the New York City government can never, without a full discourse of litigation, take away anybody's rights. Because in addition to your religious rights, you have your freedom of speech, you have the freedom of the press. You also have a property interest and property right in your job. When the city of New York allowed all these public sector workers to work when there was no vaccine, to their detriment, to their, the danger to themselves allegedly, but as soon as the vaccine came up and these same workers said, hey, wait a second, I have built-in antibodies. Hey, wait a second, I have a medical reason. The courts overnight just said, no, that's not enough. Get out of here, you scrub. And they literally let the city terminate these people over their protected property rights. No, this constitutional office is one of the strongest protections. Again, we may turn around and say, what about our public advocate, right? Because the public advocate could have did so much more during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
They did nothing, right? Because I want to be very clear. I do a lot of work with the Maha movement all across New York State. I was recently up in Albany talking about, I want to be very clear. I am not against vaccines, and I truly believe anyone who wants to be vaccinated, go get vaccinated. That's your choice, and that's your choice as an American and as a New York State citizen. What's not the choice is the government telling me I have to do that. Soon as we cross that line, and in the executive branch of government is telling people what to put in their bodies, what not to put in their bodies, without any approved legislation, that's where the line gets drawn in the sand. That's where we put our feet down and we say, look, this is illegal. People need to get back to basic civics and understanding the separation of powers, because the mayor of New York City at any time, he never has the legal authority to tell you independently what to put in your body.
Amen. The last bullet point we're going to go through on this show is Office of Emergency Power Oversight, and this is another newly elected position that you would like to see.
Correct. So again, and it all stems from this terrible tragedy that we all know was COVID. The city of New York took their emergency powers and essentially extended them into perpetuity, where people's due process rights were destroyed, people's constitutional rights were destroyed, and the city never had a justification mechanism for getting that done, and never had an ending mechanism to end it. While the rest of the country, and I think you said this earlier, Steph, we could have literally crossed the border over into Long Island, Nassau County, and we were going to restaurants, our kids were going to classes, go upstate, it was the same thing. All across the state of New York, teachers were never required to be vaccinated. Here in the city, after the federal government already declared the emergency over, the city of New York forced and compelled all these teachers, a lot of them against their will, to be vaccinated. The Office of Emergency Power Oversight would be the person on top of the mayor, on top of the city legislature, to make sure every 3 days this is brought to a hearing. And I get it. Sometimes the city needs emergency powers. Superstorm Sandy, a perfect example, right? They needed emergency powers. Let's give it to them. Those emergency powers need to be closely regulated, watched, and we need the citizens involved to make sure whoever's watching over them, those emergency powers are not used and abused to the detriment of New York City citizens.
So that's very interesting. I found when I was campaigning in 2024, what I found was my constituents didn't understand what the New York State Assembly was and why I was trying to run for office. They didn't know who their current representative was. They didn't know who their city council member was, and they didn't understand if they have an issue at Heffin Park that they had to go to their city council rep, but if they had an issue, say something that Albany could handle, the assembly can handle, they would go there. And then I had neighbors of mine praising the representative in the assembly for, oh, he helped replace the light bulb on our street light because it was out for several weeks. Well, you could have called your city council member's office. You could have just called his office. You didn't have to go see him for that. Like, that's their job, and they shouldn't get high praise for doing their job. So I think we need a Civics 101 and a 102 and a 103 so that our constituents, anybody in New York City, and we have a lot of immigrants here and a lot of people came here because they wanted the freedom of America. But not enough people are looking at what is the role of the local government and why do we need a public advocate if he's just going to sit in his little Brooklyn White House and say, hey, you know what, the mayor's got it all under control. Even for New York State, our New York State Assembly, our New York State Senate, where were they during COVID? They let Governor Cuomo have his way, did whatever he wanted, whether he was going out to dinner with his family, whether he was having a party at his house. But you had to rat out people who were having Thanksgiving dinner, and how dare they even think about it?
And I want to move to the judiciary, right? I don't want to even let just the executive branch and the legislature off the hook there, because the judiciary carried the water for them.
Absolutely.
So the assembly did, they exempted certain laws during the emergency, and they should not have done that. That was one thing. But
all right, Jimmy, we're going to keep that train of thought. We'll start that out with the second segment. But I want to thank everyone. This show is airing on April 20th at 8:30 on BronxNet Channel 70, and every first Monday and third Monday of the month on BronxNet Channel 70. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you.